guys, it's Kelly here and I'm back with another video for Honeybee Stamps. Today we are going to be talking about smaller stamp sets. So I'm going to be using a Waffle lot, So Special, Stolen My Heart, and the Smooch, and like SWAK, it's SWAK, sealed with a kiss, like the abbreviation. And that's the only one that doesn't have a sentiment that comes with it, so I used a separate one. Why are we doing 4 different cards? I am not Jennifer McGuire. I don't typically make multiple cards. However, I love small stamps. I've always loved small stamps, and I oftentimes think that they are overlooked and underrated. So I wanted to just touch on a couple of different ways that you can use smaller stamps. These ones, obviously, in particular, are smaller. Their price point is much less, which I love. But also, like, you have sets that have smaller stamps that are built into them, and we don't utilize those nearly often enough. So for this background, this is the first one. This is just going to be like a random pattern background. I picked a couple of different pink and red inks that I had already. I'm using the W+9 inks because that's what I have on hand. And I like the way that they stamp. They always, even out really nicely. But just use whatever you have on hand. The only thing I don't recommend stamping with is like Distress ink. Distress Oxide stamp beautifully, but Distress inks sometimes are a little bit challenging. So any like good dye ink that you have, this will totally work for. And it ends up looking like your own pattern paper. And you could do this really with any stamp, but I love the little kissy lips. I think that they are super cute. I can see incorporating them into a scene because that's how my brain works. But for these ones, I just wanted something that you would be able to recreate. You could do this particular style of card with any one of these stamps. They would totally make sense. You could stamp them in multiple colors in the background, or as you're going to see, doing a more monochromatic one. We're going to do that next. But this will ultimately end up looking like we've just cut it from a sheet of pattern paper. And the way that you do that is it's super important to make sure that you're stamping off the page. If you just try to line them up all nice and neat and you never stamp off the page, it's not going to look like pattern paper. So here I'm just overlapping them. I'm fine with that. It is a look for this particular card that looks just fine because all of the colors are complementary. If you were doing something like this in rainbow colors, you would have to pay better attention, but mine's are all in the same family, so it's totally fine. And then I'm starting by stamping in 3s. Once I got to the red, I did stamp it 5 times, just to kind of spread it out because I didn't have as much ground to work with. And then my darker color, I think this is Cranberry Crush, I'm going to stamp this one just kind of randomly. This one ends up being 5 as well because, again, I've run out of real estate. So I really like the way that this background came out. I struggle with this type of background because I want everything to be framed in. If you are like me, you could certainly trim this down and put a border around it, and that would be totally fine. I wanted a focal point on my card, like for this background to be exactly that, a background. And so with my sentiment, I wanted something that was going to really catch your eye. And so I stamped another set of lips, another little kissy lips in the red. And then I'm going to go in and I'm just going to add some depth with my Copics. Now, again, this is something that's totally not necessary. The background itself is certainly colorful enough that you don't even need to do this. You could just put a sentiment on it and it would be totally fine. The coloring that I'm doing is, again, not necessary. If you want like a focal point, you could just stamp this out in a bolder color and do like accent your sentiment the same way that I am. But if you did want to color them, I wanted to be able to show you how to do that. So when you like if you're kissing like a mirror, okay, it's always lighter in the center because you're not able to put as much pressure down as you would with the outside of your lips. So it's going to be darker there. Also, if you play in makeup like I occasionally do, or I should say occasionally did, because since COVID and going to night shift, like I pretty much wear makeup never. Poor Eric probably doesn't even recognize me, but it's been a year at this point, so I guess he should. Um, to make your lips look fuller, I have my father's lips, which basically means I have none. I have like zero. My dad covers his up with a mustache, but I'm a girl and I can't grow a mustache. Wait until I'm in my 70s. I'm sure by then I'll have a fully like walrus stash, but until then, I just don't. I don't have one. So, in order to make your lips look fuller, when you're doing your makeup like regular, you would leave a center highlight. So it would be darker around the edges and a center highlight in the middle, and this would help your lips look plumper. You can also overline your lips, but I wouldn't recommend that. It's very hard to do correctly and not look like you drew your lips on. You know what I'm saying? Um, so here I'm just adding some darkness around the edges, the same way that I would color anything else, lightest to darkest, darkest to lightest. I'm using, like I said, W+9 inks, which is also this similar to Hero Arts, similar to, what's the other one? Um, there's a bunch of them that are kind of like, oh, Simon Says Stamp. Um, they're all kind of pretty similar, and they are not alcohol marker safe, which means when you color on them, they will react to the alcohol ink, which for me and this purpose is totally fine. I'm not looking for the color not to smear like I would be with a black ink because I'm using all of the same colors right over top of it. So in order, like with it being right on top of it, it's just going to blend into the colors I'm already using, and so that's not problematic for me. Um, but I am just using the same, little flicks that I normally do, having the outside be darker and the light side or the inside be lighter, just like it would be if you kiss the mirror or if you were trying to make your lips look fuller when you were doing your makeup. I have recently watched, which I think is old, but I'm catching it on Netflix. I recently watched Glow Up, which is like a makeup artist competition show, and totally loved it. There were some of them that like their makeup artist just wasn't my style, and they were much more artistic versus like beauty makeup. But I think art in any form is pretty fascinating, and to see like the looks and the way that they used makeups and the way that things came together was so cool. So I super enjoyed that show. They have season 1 and season 2 on Netflix, and I watched both of them. So here, now that that is done, I have cut it out with the matching dye. I also cut out the word smooch in black and white. I cut the halo out in black and the word out in white. I'm going to build these all together. There are 4 cards in this video, and while this video is a regular length from one of my videos, I did have to cut out some things, which would be like the gluing the smooch, the white to the black. Like that's what I did. I glued it. My preferred adhesive is Tamamana multi-glue, though I do also really like the honeybee glue. So here I'm just kind of getting an idea of how I want this to go, so that it doesn't fade into the background. I put, because I because I have no lips, I don't typically wear lipstick, but I do wear a lot of gloss or shimmer, like that is really just non-pigmented, or Burt's Bees has one that's like a light mauve color that I will wear. But I thought that it would be fun to kind of turn this little lip to make it sure that it stands out from the background into almost like a sticker or like a plastic applique. So I'm using my glossy accents to do that, and it will hold that glitter in. Once that's dry, and it does take a minute to dry because you're putting so much glossy accents on there, everything got popped up on foam tape, again, just to set it apart from the background. But you, like I said before, you can totally make this much simpler if you want to mass produce these. I did not use my stamp positioner, my Misty, for this because I was moving my, like I was stamping so many different colors. But if you were doing multiples of these, like you could certainly use a stamp positioner to knock something like this out. So I'm going to go ahead and adhere my smooch on an angle. I just thought that was kind of fun. It allowed room for the other portion of my sentiment and my little accent set of lips. So it says sealed with a smooch, which I think is super cute. Um, I did have to go back in and trim out a little piece of foam so that it would sit flush on top of my H there. I wanted it to be tucked into like a tight little triangle, just because that's how I prefer my sentiments. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's the only way that you can do it. So that is this whole card. And again, you could do this with any of these smaller stamp sets. This one is the You're So Special. And I'm basically going to do the same premise as far as the background, but I'm going to stamp all of it in a gray tone. This is Silver Lining. So it's a cooler gray, but you could do this with anything that you have. If you have warmer grays, or because it's a sewing machine, that was the one that made the most sense to me. And I'm just going to continually stamp this pattern across the front, varying which way I tilt it until the whole thing is filled up. You could totally leave it like this and it would be fine. There is a little heart in the Waffle lot set, and I took that out because it's the same style of heart that's on the sewing machine, and I'm just going to fill that in randomly into my pattern here, just to make it a little bit fuller. Again, don't overlook your smaller stamps. Like if you're looking at your card and you're like, this looks a little bit empty, it needs a little bit of something, see what kind of smaller stamps that you have. Because I was going with a kind of grayed out background, I decided to go with some paler colors for my hearts. You certainly could go bolder, but I picked, just some pastels. And the way that I like to do it is I will color like 3 hearts, because I have so many. I'll color like 3 hearts at a time just to make sure I have enough of each color represented on each card. And then at the end, I'll start to look at what I have already on the card and what holes I need to fill. So once all the hearts were filled in, I just went in with a C1 just to add a little bit of shading to my sewing machines. I'm only going to use the C1, which once it dries back is pretty light. But that way, we have that pattern paper look because everything's kind of off the edge. And it makes sense with the card, but it doesn't steal the show. So once that's done, I stamped another one of the sewing machines. For this black outline, I used Hero Arts Intense Black ink. And then I'm going to pick, though, like that same cool gray, except this time I'm going to color it with more of the shading, because this is going to be my focal point. So I'm filling the whole thing in with C1, and then I'm going to go back in with C3 and C5 in the areas that are darker. If you're new to my videos, or maybe you just need a refresher, anytime that you have 2 points that meet, you'll have a shadow. And anytime that you have where one object lays on top of another, you'll have a shadow. That's a really good, easy rule. I decided to do more of a center highlight where I added shading kind of from the left and right hand side. Where this sewing machine is curving over to like where the thread is, that would also be a little bit darker. So I decided to leave my highlight kind of in the top right corner and then in the center of the middle. Once I go out to my light or my darkest color, then I come back in and go back into my lightest just to blend everything out. Originally, when I started coloring this, and this is why we have to be adaptable and know that everything is fixable, because if I didn't feel that way, I would have pitched this and started all over again. There's no reason to do that. So I originally colored it with the same reds that I used on the lips in the first card. But because I went with such pale colors in the background, it didn't make sense. It didn't look right. It was too bold and they didn't match. I also, the little handle on the side of the sewing machine I colored as well, just for a little extra pop of color. So here you can see like these two things don't go together. So I went back in with my zero marker and I went right over the hearts and the handle to kind of pull out some of that darker red color. And you have to be careful because you don't want it to bleed. But once I had lightened up the color, then I just went back in with the lightest red that I used on the background, and it lightened it up so much. It was so much better. In order to get my sentiment where I wanted it on my little white panel here, I just placed my sewing machine there as a holder so that I would make sure that everything sat the way that I wanted it to. And then I went ahead and stamped my sentiment. For the sentiment, I skipped over to the Hero Arts black dye ink. It's just a really good bold black ink, and it's typically one of my go-tos for my sentiments. I'm going to stamp this down and then be able to put my sewing machine right back there, and that will be my focal point for this card. Again, this one will work with any of the stamp sets that we're using today. You could do this with the little raccoon. You could do this with the waffle. This whole setup will work for any of those. I'm going to glue this down flat because I'm going to pop up the whole panel. There's nothing wrong with the way this looks, but I just prefer a grounded image. It's just me. You don't have to agree. You don't have to do it this way. It's your card. You do you. But because I like a grounded image, I went ahead and went back in with those same C markers, and I'm just going to give a little line underneath it. I did color the white portion of the die cut because it wouldn't make any sense for there to be ground underneath it and for you to have this big white line. You know what I'm saying? So I did want to go ahead and color that. And then I put foam tape all over the back of it and then just mounted that to the center of my card. This one, again, because it's popped up, you don't have to pop it up like if you're trying to mail it. But is 2 layers, I guess per se. And then I'm going to add the glitter to the little hearts. The third card is featuring the little raccoon. This is the only one that you could not do. You could do this with any other critter that you have, for sure. But you can't do it with the other images. But I did want to just give you an option. So here I have my Eclipse masking paper, and I'm just going to draw myself a little hill, nothing fancy, just to give myself a guideline. And then I'm going to go ahead and trim this out. So that way you're going to need both pieces. You're going to need the top and the bottom. This will work with any sort of scene that you want to do. Green grass, if you want to do something that's more dirt or desert, like this, like pretty much you could use this for anything. But I wanted to do snow because we are in, January when I made it. And so I picked Shaded Lilac and Speckled Egg. I like a bluish purple snow, but not everybody does. So if you want yours to be more gray, Hickory Smoke would be a good one, like a blue gray. I like the Speckled Egg, just because it's kind of like a neutral blue. But almost always for my snow, I use Shaded Lilac. That's just the one that I prefer. It gives my cards enough color that they don't look flat. And typically, if you're looking at something that is white and it's shadow, like it nighttime or snow, like it has a bit of a purple tinge to it. And then I just went right over top of that with the Speckled Egg. You want to leave the top of this, if you're doing snow, you want to leave the top of it white. You want it to just blend out into the background, because you have to have, like, if you want it to look white, you have to leave white in there. So I'm going to do the sky with the Speckled Egg as well, and then also some Salty Ocean. But in order for that hill to stand out, you have to put something up against the edge of that hill. There's no choice, because the background is actually going to form the top of your white hill. And you'll see what I mean. I'm going to show you before I move on to the next step. So I'm just kind of working the sky on the way down. This isn't anything fancy. It's just super simple ink blending. Couple of things to note about ink blending, because I've seen on different like Stamp Junkies and things like that, people who are still struggling. So here, this is with having nothing behind it. Like, see how there's no hill? Like, it didn't make the hill. because I didn't give it any contrast. So now I'm going to go in with just the speckled egg, and I'm not going to take it up very high at all. I just need it right on that edge of that border in order to create the hill. And then once I remove the mask this time, the hill will be there. But anyway, I've seen on Stamp Junkies where people are still struggling with this. You have to start off the page. You have to light pressure. Um, do the small circles. Let the ink blender do the work. You should not be like straining yourself to push on this thing, because that's how you're going to end up getting the circles. I went ahead and stamped my raccoon down just for placement purposes. I am going to end up using the coordinating die cuts to cut mine out. That's what I'm doing here, is stamping another one. But I do sometimes, when I'm creating a scene, I like to have that reference there, so I know where I'm going to put my other things. So once that's done and out of the way, I've placed my sentiment. I know where it's going to go because I have my little raccoon as reference. And then it's super cute. You've stolen my heart. I think it's adorable. And in order to kind of really drive home that, I'm going to do the little hearts again as an accent, because I think the little hearts as a little accent are adorable. I love little teeny tiny hearts. In fact, the only tattoo that I have on my body is a little teeny tiny heart. So once that was done, here's why I wanted the reference. First of all, so I could put my little shadow in. And I'm going to do that with some BVs and some grays. So I started off with the blue violets. They are a little bit vibrant, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I like to knock mine back a bit with the C1, so it just kind of blends back in. And then I thought that it would be really cute to kind of like tie in the whole "you've stolen my heart" if you could see his little footprints in the snow, like, where he's stolen this heart and kind of scampered off. So I am just they're more like ovals, and I'm using my lightest blue violet for that. And then I'm going to add a little bit of shading just in the back area, because none of us step even. So there would be parts that would be a little bit darker. And then I put them down in an alternating pattern, just like it would be if you were, walking, like left, right, left, right. I actually had little raccoon or something footprints in the snow this morning at my house. So I'm blending those out again with that C. My shadow is not as dark as I wanted it, so I did go back in and kind of add some depth to that. And then I'm going to go on to coloring my my little raccoon here. Raccoons can be a little bit tricky because they have that mask over their eyes, but you still want to be able to see their eyeballs, right? Because they're cute and you don't want them to be eyeballless. So what I have found over the years that works for me is I will use the medium grays right over the eye section, and then I will add darker grays and blacks to the outside edge, so it still does give the perception of being black, but you can still see their eyes, and you'll see what I mean as we go along. So my peanut is not, they're not doing Valentines this year, which makes me sad. It's because of the Rona. They're not like I guess they're gonna do like a little class party, but they're not like anybody bring in Valentines or exchange Valentines or anything like that. Up until this point, I have always made his Valentines. I would be interested to know if you make your little ones Valentines. If you do, stand by for the last card, because that one will be the easiest one to mass produce. But I've always done his Valentines. Like the first year we did, what did we do? I used a heart stencil and we did glow sticks. And then last year, I did the heart stencil on probably like I guess what would now be considered like a slimline card. And then I punched 2 holes that I could just slide the little glow bracelets through. And so that was kindergarten. And then last year he wanted to do pencils. So we did Valentine's pencils that had they were shaped like guitars. The eraser looked like a guitar. And so those were pretty fun. He had to make his own Valentine's Day box last year. So I actually used Honeybee Stamps for that. They have some pretty awesome music themed sets. And so I was able to make his box and make his Valentines with those. This year he hadn't really said, and I really didn't honestly want to bring it up because I didn't think they were going to do it. And then sure enough, they just recently sent out the email that said that they were not going to be doing that. They'll have activities in the class for kids, and then they'll each get like a small packet of candy or something from the teacher. And that's pretty much all they're going to be doing about Valentine's this year. So again, lightest to darkest, darkest to lightest, and then once I have everything where I want it to be, I'm going to go in and just finish out the lighter color of it, which does go all the way out to the C1, like on the highlight on the tail, the middle of his face, and then on his belly. For his little heart, I'm going to use the same color combination that I have been using up until this point. I am going to add just a little flick of it in his ears, the lightest color, which is an R32. I certainly could have gone lighter, and you could as well, or if you prefer pinks to reds, which I actually do, but I wanted them to all match because I got problems. So once that's done, I'm going to bring in the background and I'm going to color the hearts the same way. Yes, I am coloring right over the blue. No, I did not have any issues. If I was going for a paler color, it might be more of a problem. But then I'm going to pop him up on a foam tape, and this one's pretty much done. Like this, again, you could do this for any sort of critter that you had. I'm going to add the glitter to his heart and the hearts that accent the sentiment. And I am going to go ahead and add the glossy accents to the ones by the sentiment, just because I think it's a fun little extra added detail that you can kind of put on there to give your card a little something, especially since they're more simple. This card is almost an exact copy of what I did for my wedding thank you cards the first time I got married. So I used the speckled egg and I just did kind of like a halo of a blue in the center. And this was like way back when, before I knew what quality stamps were. And there are, oh, Lord have mercy, there is a difference. So I had bought some like 99-cent stamps from a local craft store. I think they were acrylic. They were not great. They stamped not well. But they had like a little wedding dress and a little like tuxedo. And so I did like a little blue halo. I stamped the wedding dress and then trimmed that out, stamped the tuxedo and then trimmed that out. So the groomsmen got all the tuxes and the bridesmaids got all the little wedding dresses. And I just did a really simple blue halo and a thank you and like their little outfit, and it was so simple and really fast to do. So that background is pretty typical of me. It's got some little spatters of the speckled egg. It's got some little spatters of some perfect pearls. Once that's dry, again, I'm just going to use my stamp as a placeholder here for my sentiment, there's one that says I like you and one that says I love you. I love you, I like you, waffle lot, which is adorable. But I chose the I love you, a waffle lot, and I'm going to stamp that down. And then again, I'm going to use those little accent hearts, which is also from this set. Like I'm actually using the heart that goes with the set this time. And then it also has like a little pat of butter, which I think is super cute and like just a little extra something. But I decided to put the heart on my my waffle. So here I have 3 different colors for each one. I picked some warmer, what I think one of them's called leather. Some warmer browns for my syrup. I am going to be coloring it so that it looks shiny, which really I'm going to be putting glossy accents over it. So is that necessary? Probably not, but I did want you to be able to see how to do that in case you're interested in it. And that is where you see those white gaps. So I put the darker color around the edges and then worked my way out to the lighter color and then left a white kind of circle. I don't like the highlight at the top. That's just me personally. I felt like it was a little bit flat and I wish I had rounded it out more, but what's done is done. And I knew I was putting glossy accents over it. So there's that. Um, so here, once that's all done, I'm going to move on to the waffle portion, which I just picked some lighter browns and then kind of just followed that grid pattern. I also did add some shading underneath my syrup, like kind of where it's dripping down. And then I just picked one side of the line and added shading to it. I didn't do shading on both sides because I still wanted there to be some lighter areas so that it would make sense as a waffle. As a waffle. And then once that was done, I didn't go back, back through it, lightest, darkest, darkest to lightest. I just went back to my lightest color, gave it a once over so everything blended. And then again, using that same red combination that we've been using, and I will use that same red combination on my card background. We really didn't have to. We had a little bits and pieces of story time this time around, just because there was so much going on with the cards. 4 cards is a lot for this girl. I'm going to pop this up on foam. I will caution you on doing this is that if you're going to add the glossy accents, make sure you add foam to the top and foam to the bottom and not just foam to the center like I did, because the glossy accents is a little bit heavier and it can cause your the edges to sag if it doesn't have proper support, and mine didn't, but I'm fine with it. So I put the glitters on, and then I'm going to add the glossy accents right over the top of it. I like to outline anything I'm filling in with glossy accents first, and then I do small circles, just kind of filling it in. If you have any bubbles, you can certainly pop those with like needles. And then here's all 4 of the cards. I think they're all super cute. These stamp sets are all available in the Honeybee store for a really reasonable price point. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I really appreciate it, and I will catch you on the next video. Bye.